It is garbage truck day. There will be garbage. Better get used to the idea. And let's see, we've got a Zoom meeting. Let's go for it. Zoom, join meeting. Zoom, join meeting. Here's the meeting with Stan.
What's going on, Marshall? You ready for season 3?
Hey, Stan, it's season 3 of the Draftsmen Podcast, and we are ready for it. This is going to be a wow thing.
Wow, good job. You sold it.
Etc.
Don't get them too excited.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that good.
Yeah.
It's the Draftsmen Show. Yeah.
Haven't seen you in a while. Do you have a different beard or anything than what I'm used to?
Yeah, I bought a new one.
Yeah.
No, what do you mean? It's the same thing.
That's the same Van Dyke. Yeah, okay.
It's the same stubble I've always had. I have a haircut from a different barber.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it.
You looked a little different to me, but I've been looking at pictures of you from way back, even 6-7 years ago, and it's...
Yeah, so I just look older now, huh?
Yes, you are. How's family life?
Great. Quinn is getting older.
Mm-hmm.
Remember how I was bragging that she was sleeping all night?
Yeah, I guess she heard
ended.
you.
Yeah, that ended like the day after. She's been going through a growth spurt or something. She also got her vaccines and stuff, her 3-month shots, that like the next day, and that like threw her off.
If it throws off Quinn, it throws off the parents as well.
Yep. It's fine. We're doing all right. It's just sleep. Who needs it?
Yeah. You don't need it.
What about you? Any updates to you've been mostly teaching your own workshops, right?
Yeah, lots of teaching. And, last year, Draftsmen listeners and I got together for not only classes, but also a museum trip. And we hung out at the Getty.
What?
And we didn't know that within 2 months, that would be the end of that.
When did you guys go?
Before the lockdown.
Oh, okay.
So
this was like
a number of us hung out at the Getty. It was a great time.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have any idea that it was going to be the end of it and that there were no more museums. That's really the only thing I miss about going out to museums. But this last month has been a little bit of that. I did a perspective workshop that ended up being more of a boot camp for the amount of work that people did. And right now I'm doing a composition boot camp, which I'm doing all I can to make it more of a workshop. But with an emphasis on work, students are working on their composition skills. So I am hanging out with Draftsmen listeners. And I'm also doing a class with Vance Kovacs. And it's called Concept Art Bootcamp. And he has been demoing for us. We had our second class last night. It's been a wonderful little group with some really gifted students. And so, I am teaching, and also the semesters have started at the community college, so I'm in the throes.
You're back teaching at community college. I thought you left that.
There are 2 schools I was teaching at that I'm no longer teaching at, but I am still teaching at my junior college, Fullerton Community College, the one that I went to. I'm still teaching 2 classes there.
I didn't know you were teaching at 3 colleges.
I've taught at 4 colleges regularly. As regular colleges.
Well, Marshall, that was a great segue into our topic today.
What is our topic?
We're going to be talking about different ways you can be an artist and have a career doing that. You looks like you're in a transition right now from pretty much being employed or somewhat. You're probably a contractor at all these schools, right?
Yeah, I've been a part-time employee at every school, which means that there's no guarantee that you're going to be there next. Yeah.
So you're transitioning now from employee/freelancer to entrepreneur. You're starting your own business. You're teaching your own workshops, organizing them on your own, marketing them on your own, teaching them, executing them on your own, taking payments. You're an entrepreneur now. So you're transitioning from these 2 to this one. And this is what this episode is about.
Well, good.
It's going to be great to hear your perspective on it.
Well, I'm happy to tell you anything that I have to tell you, which could be too much, because I've been a freelancer for 40-some years and probably will be for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And you're not a freelancer. You are, how do you define yourself?
An angel?
No, an entrepreneur?
Yes, I mean, I also went through a transition at one point in my life. I mean, I taught at a school. I've done commissioned work, which is, I was a freelancer. I've been at galleries, which is basically, I guess, also a freelancer. I don't know.
Yeah, we got to define all this stuff.
And we will, but after we tell our own life stories here, I guess. And I mean, soon after that, I started my own business. And since then, I guess I define myself as an entrepreneur.
I think of you as an entrepreneur. Now, last year at this time, we did 8 episodes on Art School as Project, which seems to have had an effect on people.
Yeah.
I hope for good. Whereas if we take up the subject of how to have an art career, developing your art career, we've talked about that a lot already. So I guess out of, what have we done? How many episodes of Draftsmen have we done so far?
I could check real quick. 65.
And so many of those 65 episodes were related directly to or indirectly, like the art education thing is assuming you're getting an art education so that you can have a career.
Yeah, we have. We've obviously, there's no way we could have done 2 seasons without talking about working as an artist and your career. But it's funny, we've never actually done an episode dedicated to it.
Yeah, we did. We talked about alternative ways to make money as an artist, I think, in one of those.
Marshall, why didn't you say this when we were planning this episode?
I did say this when we were planning this episode.
You didn't say making money.
We've already taken this up.
I'm looking at the description.
It doesn't mean that because we've done it once that we can't do it again. It's a principle in life. Maybe we'll do it better. Maybe we won't.
Yeah.
But let me say this. 8 episodes on Art School as Project. Getting your art education, hard as it is not as hard as getting a career.
First, let's start by defining the 3 levels of independence. It's something I made up. I don't know if this is there's only 3 levels of independence or there's one I'm missing or something, but whatever. Let's do it. This is it.
The least level of independence is what?
Employment.
Yeah. Why? Why is that such a low level of independence?
I mean, because you're basically the person or the company employing you tells you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, where to do it.
Well, with an anti-sales pitch like that, why would anybody want employment?
There's a lot of reasons. I mean, some people think job security. I disagree. Huh? But that might be a thing. It depends on where you're going. Another one is structure. Some people, they need the structure to go to, the structure of a school to learn. Some people might need the structure of a company to do work. It depends on your personality. You might not want to run your own business.
Yeah.
It's really about what you want. You just want to go to work, do your thing, make some money, and then enjoy your outside life that, you don't really care about money. You just want to make enough to do all the other stuff that you want to do. Enjoy life, enjoy your family. Then that's for you, right? Structure.
I want to say something about that, about the employment level. Yeah. I had one full-time job, which I began at the age of 50 something, and it lasted for less than 3 years. It was teaching online for the artdepartment.org. And when it began, where I was on salary, I was aware I don't have to market. I don't have to keep track of how the money is coming in and going out in the same way that I did before. I have much less responsibility. Yep. All I've got to do is think about the art and the teaching. And that was the best thing about it.
Yeah.
To know that I got to do the work that I loved without having to run the business.
Yeah.
It made me a little lazy so that when it ended and I had to run my business again, it's like, oh, the responsibility comes back.
Yeah.
But that was a good thing about employment. I started to see why people want a job for the structure, the security of knowing that the bills will be paid because that money's coming in. Yeah.
Yeah. There's benefits as well. I mean, people get health insurance, people get, paid time off, maternity, paternity leave. There's a bunch of benefits to being an employee. But yeah, there's a lot of good stuff about it. The business takes care of the business, and you take care of the art, whatever your role is.
Yeah, you could even take employment as a category and break it up into all sorts of different kinds of subcategories about working for big companies, working for small companies. True. Now that it used to be that companies would not let you work at home remotely, and so many concept artists wanted to, so that they didn't have to make the commute to LA or whatever else. Yeah. And it was just typically not allowed except with a few superstars. And now that it's been forced, companies, I think, are seeing, there is an advantage to this. And so that will become more the case, that you work for a company and you are able to work from home, less driving.
Yeah, companies have been forced this year or last year to develop systems for making it work remotely. They didn't have reasons before to pour money into making it work. And now they have, and now why not keep using it for its benefits?
Yeah, I'm glad about that.
Yeah, it's a good thing overall, I think, for employment. Freelancing is the next one. You're now not controlled by any one company. You can hop around, you can choose who your clients are. And so you have a little bit more independence. But still, your clients decide kind of what you're doing because they give you the job. They give you the task. Here's what I want. Mm-hmm. Of course, you can structure it. If you're in demand, you could choose whatever you want. Mm-hmm. But now all of a sudden you have to start doing your own taxes. You got to figure all that stuff out. And you have to market yourself. You got to make sure that you're constantly getting new clients.
This is where I have the most to tell about the woes and glories of freelancing. But the security thing, the worst thing about freelancing at the beginning is trying to get people to hire you. Mm-hmm. And then trying to get enough people to hire you where it really is a career. But if you've got a number of people hiring you, in 2008, there was a serious recession in this company, and I couldn't believe how many people were losing their jobs. People who had been in secure jobs for decades. And my son was still in high school, and he observed me, and he just pointed out, you've diversified your clients to where you've got 15 to 20 people who are hiring you for one thing or another, so that if some of them go down, it doesn't mean that your whole career goes down. So there is another thing about freelancing, is that there will always be new clients and there'll always be some lost clients. But if there's a client base, as people call it, that you've got enough that are regular, then there can be some security in it that way.
Yeah.
Freelancing is like getting a train moving. It's really hard to get it moving, but once it does get moving, one thing leads to another.
That's true. And right now it is easier to get that stuff moving because of the internet and social networks and all that stuff. If you start early, even while you're in school, growing your social media, by the time you're ready for it, you might just jump right in, and maybe you'll be able to jump right in even before you're ready for it. I know that even, I got some work, I don't even know how, when I was really young. I had a website with my portfolio on it. And, back then, like, I guess there weren't, the internet wasn't as filled with, millions of artists with their portfolios. Back then, making a website was actually kind of hard. They didn't have Squarespace and all those things. You had to build it yourself. Yeah. I had to use HTML and build my website. And so, like, people found my website looking for artists, and they hired me. And I was like 19, 20, or maybe it's like 20, 21 or something like that. And I was hired to do an animation for a music band, or for a band. One of those music type bands.
A yelling band.
Yes. No, they weren't a yelling band, but yeah, they hired me to make a 3D music video for them with, just fully 3D animated. And then another team was trying to get an Orson Scott Card movie made. You know, Orson Scott Card?
Yes. Ender's Game, right?
Yeah, Ender's Game. So they were trying to make a different movie made. I forgot what what it was called. It's based on one of his books. It never got made. Basically, what they needed at the time was an artist to kind of create the vision for it, and then pitch it to investors and stuff to get the movie off the ground, or studios. But like that project never got finished. They didn't have much of a budget. You know, I learned pretty quickly like this whole freelance thing is like really messy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it is.
I was just getting discovered just because I had a website. Like I wasn't even that good yet, you know? But now I think it's even easier with social media to grow.
Even freelancing, like employment, there's so many subcategories of what kind of company you work for.
Yeah.
With freelancing, most of my freelancing was for advertising agencies. Whereas if you are a freelancer for animation studios or movie studios, it will be a different set of dynamics. But let's go back to what happened with ad agencies. Mm-hmm. You would have 3 or 4 jobs that were on hold. We're definitely going to use you for this. It's going to start in a week, maybe 2 weeks. And so you're waiting, and then all of a sudden, 3 jobs happen. They say go, and these are pressurous jobs where you're going to be devoting your life to. 3 of them happen all at once. What do you do in a case like that? And one thing that you can do is work with friends that are going to help you. Say, I'm going to have a real crunch doing 3 jobs at a time. And then your studio, you're sharing the work to get things done, which means that then you're starting to grow your business as a freelance,
right?
As a freelance studio.
Interesting. So it's like a cooperative of artists. But would they work under your name? Like, would you submit the work as Marshall, or would you say, "Hey, I know you hired me, but I actually had my friend do it"?
It would depend. It would depend on the circumstances. I couldn't do a children's book, but my friend did a children's book, and I helped him with it. And his name was on the children's book, not mine. But I helped him airbrush, and he shared some of the money with me. And the client doesn't care. All they know is that it looks like what they expected from the portfolio piece.
Right.
But it was different at different times. And over the years, we learned how to deal with that. But let me mention something that just happened recently. Because of the lockdown, is that live action television and live action movie production grinded not to a halt, but it just almost stopped.
Yeah.
There were something like 400 live action productions going on in Los Angeles and vicinity before the lockdown. And then within a matter of a few weeks after it, there were 30. But at the same time, animation studios were, well, we got to finish this season. We got to finish this show. Why don't we do it as animation? My students, many of whom work in animation, were suddenly in a position where they were having to turn down opportunities because there was such a sudden surge of need for animation work. And not necessarily animation. I mean the peripheral stuff around it. Visual development, storyboarding, all that kind of stuff.
Wait, why did they go all of a sudden to different artists? Why couldn't they use the artists that they had in-house, but now just use them remotely? I don't understand why they had to go out searching for new artists.
Because production did not slow down with animation. Production amped up. And so all of a sudden, a person who may only have one client, now we need more people. And so there were more opportunities.
Why did the lockdown make animations amp up? I don't see the connection there.
Because animation can be done entirely with remote production. Animation as it is right now, you do not have to have people on a set with cameras.
So because they weren't working on these live action things anymore, they're starting to use the resources on these animation projects. They kind of shifted people over there.
Yeah.
Like the directors and writers and all that stuff or whatever.
For 3 or 4 months this summer, when I was keeping in touch with my students in the animation and former students in the animation industry, one after another was telling me there's more work than ever and everything's going fine with the company and on and on. So it was that was different than the way it worked with advertising agencies, is that sometimes if you are a freelancer for a particular industry, even though you're not employed by a single company, there are still waves of opportunities and sudden pulling away. Now we're not doing this anymore. Less on movies. People who do movies for live action are still working because movies can take a year sometimes on these big budget productions of pre-production. So it doesn't make that much difference. But when it came to TV, the people working in TV, what do you do when all of a sudden the stuff that is supposed to come out every week, live action, you've halted production?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, I didn't know that. That's cool. The only thing I want to add with freelance is just give people a few resources. One we already mentioned, but every time I come back to it, I'm just like, it amazes me every time. It's like, it doesn't get worse. Is the Make Good Art speech?
Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, by Neil Gaiman. I listened to it again just to prepare for this episode, just because it's like, oh well, freelancing. Well, make good art speech, because he basically just gives 6 what do you call it? 6 tips on freelancing, and then the last one, or the 6th one was secrets of freelance, which was that in order to succeed, you need 2 out of the 3 qualities. That's the one that we always mention, but there's actually 6 things that he talks about throughout that speech.
Can you list the 6 things?
Yeah, I actually took notes on it this last time I listened to it again. So the first one, when you start a career in the arts, you have no idea what you're doing. So that was the first thing, and then he goes into detail about it. I don't want to give a detailed summary of the whole thing. The second thing is, if you have an idea of what you want to make, just go and do that. Third, when you start off, you have to deal with the problems of failure. You need to be thick-skinned to learn that not every project will survive.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth, I hope you'll make mistakes. If you're making mistakes, it means you're out there doing something, and the mistakes in themselves can be useful. And then he goes to talk about some examples.
That's so encouraging.
Yeah. Fifthly, while you are at it, make your art, do the stuff that only you can do. So make your art, make the stuff you can do. Mm-hmm. And then the 6th was, you need 2 out of the 3 qualities. You need to have either good work, you're easy to get along with, or you deliver your work on time. You need 2 out of the 3. Yeah. And just the way he delivers that speech is really inspiring. Okay, let's move on. We mentioned this speech 5 times already in our podcast.
I know we have. But I can't imagine anyone who's going to go into the arts who has not spent time with Neil Gaiman's speech and made notes on it and talked about it with friends.
Yeah, if you haven't, go listen to it. I don't want to discuss it anymore. Just go listen to it. It's not long. Yeah. It's 10 minutes. And the second resource I want to suggest is Seth Godin's freelance course.
Tell me.
Honestly, I personally have not taken this course. It's on Udemy, I think. But I have heard him talk a lot about freelance from his books. I listen to his podcasts all the time, and everything he says about freelancing is it's really good. I love it, and so I'm pretty sure his course is good.
But he charges about $200 for it.
$200, yeah.
I haven't taken it either, but I agree with you. I trust him.
Yeah.
Because he offers such generous insight, and also insight that really is new and surprising sometimes, where I haven't heard that from another teacher.
Yeah, I trust everything he does so far. I've always been like, yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And so if you want to go into freelancing, Seth Godin does have a course on it. Try it out. Let me know if it's good. Let me know what you learned from it.
Yeah.
You want to move on to the third one? We said this episode is going to be about entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Let's move to entrepreneurship.
Yes. All right. What is it? Okay. Basically, I forgot who defined it. I think it was Seth Godin. He said it's creating something bigger than yourself to make money while you sleep. I think he said that somewhere. I don't know where I heard it.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, there's many types of entrepreneurship, but mostly it's built around a business that provides either a product or a service to either another business or to a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
As a business grows, it becomes much more than the person that started the business. It's not just about you, the freelancer, you, the employee. It's now this company does this thing. And it becomes about the product or the service that it offers.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to scale it up, you have to separate yourself from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the challenge, is how do you do that?
Well, you have done that. So you've given it a lot of conscious thought. The difference between how you did it and I did it is that I did not set out to be an entrepreneur. I simply set out to find anyone who would pay me anything to draw anything because I wanted to draw and I wanted an excuse to justify it. But I wasn't thinking, I'm going to build my business. It was much more slapdash than that. Whereas
Marshall,
you seem
you're
like
giving
you
me too
were
much credit. Listen, I started, yes, with a dream of building a company. But when I started making the YouTube videos, or really when I started making my blog posts, I didn't know that it could potentially grow to have a team of people and collaborating with companies and a platform where other artists could, I did not have all of this stuff in mind. I was just making tutorials. I was teaching people for free.
So this is Neil Gaiman's first point, which is you don't know what you're doing.
Just go. Start. Fail. Mess up. Just keep going. You know what you think you want to. You know what you do. You don't. It's okay. Just start doing something, and then it could grow. I mean, okay. You right now, all you're trying to do is find people who will pay you to teach them something, right? Composition, storytelling, perspective, whatever. Once you start, growing that, and you have way too much demand, you're going to have a problem of how can you now scale yourself? And you're going to start looking for solutions to that. And you will find those solutions. And that will cause, that's when your business starts growing and it becomes more than your current goal of finding someone that'll pay you.
Because it's in motion.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I think a lot of people, they're intimidated maybe of the word. And thinking that they don't know as much about business and entrepreneurship as other people, and so they kind of freeze up and they don't do it. They don't even try. Yeah. And that it's okay. It's all about failure. Really, the only way to learn is to fail. The trick is to fail fast. Mike
Moran's "Do It Wrong Quickly." Do you know about that?
Why does that sound so funny? It sounds like bad advice.
Yeah, but it's the best. That's the second point or second or third point Neil Gaiman made.
Yeah. Do it wrong really quick as much as possible. Should we talk a little bit more about failing fast?
If you have more to say, yes.
We do quick sketch, right? As figurative artists, we do quick sketch because it allows us to practice certain concepts very quickly. Every 3 to 5 minutes, you're practicing gesture, or you're practicing mannequinization, or you're practicing proportions, or whatever it is that you're practicing within your quick sketches. You're able to fail every 3 to 5 minutes, and get feedback on that. And the same concept can apply to growing a business, to doing whatever. Anything you're trying to learn, you go out there and you fail fast. Don't have these giant ambitions in the beginning. Before you even learn how to do, draw a quick sketch gesture, setting out to do a 50-foot mural. You know what I mean? Start with those quick sketches, those gestures. So when you go into business, start with little things. Start learning little things like that you can try out quickly and fail and learn, and then you keep growing on top of that. Don't set out on this huge 20-year mission unless you already kind of know what you're doing. And don't be afraid to realize that you're doing something that's going to fail. That doesn't mean just give up on everything you do, but sometimes you just gotta say, okay, no, this didn't work. Let's learn from it. Let's move on to something else. Follow through, learn the lesson, and keep going. But just because you started something does not mean you have to spend more time to continue with a failure.
When I see students setting out to freelance, which now is almost always on the internet, as happy as I am for students who get jobs in companies, there is something particularly exciting knowing the difficulties ahead, that still, this is your product. Not everybody's inclined, Stan. Not everybody really, it's not just the word entrepreneurship that scares some people. It's that they really don't have that kind of a spirit. It is more important to them to have structure. But there is a way there is a way that I gauge this pretty quickly. A number of the classes that I do, the first assignment is to design your own project. In fact, that is the title of composition, perspective, design your own project. And a lot of students have a tough time. I don't know how to design my own project. Well, here's some helps. What is it that you wish you could do for money? What is it that you would say, this is the project I wanted to do even if I wasn't taking this class? This is what I'd do if I wasn't bound by a class. Now, can you define that and then make it fit what we're doing with the criteria on this class? And some people do get excited about that. And when they do, those are entrepreneurs. They know how to say, I'm going to start with my desires, like Neil Gaiman talked about. I want to start with what I have to offer and what I want, and then see, is there a way to develop this so that it fits this class or fits a market where people would pay for it? But that is a test of an entrepreneurial spirit. If a person says, I like designing my own project. If a person says, I need someone else to tell me what to do, to me, that's sort of a watershed tipping point of this person is more inclined toward entrepreneurship and a person less inclined.
Wouldn't that also be a good test of whether this person is a good artist?
No.
Not craftsman, not just someone who can execute correctly, but a good artist.
Yeah, a good composer.
Yes.
A good person who makes decisions, because one bears entrepreneurship bears the responsibility of making a decision and taking responsibility for the decision. Yeah. Whereas the desire to, I don't want to do that, means that you might say, I would rather have someone else make the decision and let me just carry through the work. An artist versus a craftsman. I see what you're getting at.
Being an artist is all about problem solving, isn't it?
Yeah. It's about making decisions.
So is business.
Yeah.
Starting a company. Like, it's all about problem solving and creativity to solve problems.
Yeah.
You could define the problems. Like, it's also about asking the right questions with art and with business. But all of that kind of goes together. You have to be brave enough to even search for the right questions and then attempt to answer them correctly.
Mm-hmm.
With both of them, I see those very closely related.
I do too. I think that if you're composing with art, which is how you're going to make it art because you say, I think it should be this way. You pull back up and you say, I'm also composing my projects and my career. But here is a way where it can become symbiotic.
Okay.
A person who loves to make decisions often cannot carry through with all those decisions because there's too much of the actual labor to be done for one person to do it. And a person who loves to have someone else give them structure, if the two get together, if one person says, I can use you because I can pay you to, or give you a percentage of this if you can carry through with the things I can't do. Another person says, you can bear the weight of responsibility for this, and I will do everything I can to contribute to it. Those are symbiotic relationships between those two types of personalities.
Yeah. Now, are you talking about business or being an artist in that specific situation?
I'm talking about when you're a student in school.
Yeah.
And you don't like it when the teacher lets you design your own project. He doesn't tell me what I'm supposed to do.
Okay.
Versus when you're in school and the teacher does define the project and you say, why would I bother to do that? I got my own ideas for a project. Those are two opposite personalities, both of whom are students that can be complementary to each other.
Okay. And then what does that suggest? Let's say that the people listening right now have now identified which of those two groups they fit into, what they naturally react to in those situations.
Uh-huh.
What does that mean for both of those? Does that mean they should either become, employees, try to look for a company to work for, or become an entrepreneur?
So like advice for them?
Yeah, like does that suggest this personality type? Does that suggest that they naturally fit better into one of these different types of careers?
I think it does. I think it's a litmus test for that I like to make decisions. So yeah, advice would be to the one who likes someone else to give them structure is have such good craft that other people want you to do the work for them. Mm-hmm. And if you're the person who likes to make the decisions, then you've got personnel challenges. You've got how will you pitch? How will you convince? How will you get the funding for? How will you get people to buy? It's a different level of responsibility. But some of the people who are best at designing the projects are not good at carrying them through.
Because they're the creative thinkers. They might not be good craftsmen, but they're the creative thinkers. So there's two very different things here. You don't have to be good at both.
That's right.
A lot of entrepreneurs actually are not good at executing on the actual business. A lot of them are as well. The best ones usually are, because then that makes them a better boss, right? They can communicate with the people that they're working with, and they know what kind of tasks to assign. Like for example, and I might be going on a tangent again, but I like it. I learned how to edit making my videos first. I didn't know how to do it, but I learned the craft of it before hiring someone to do it for me.
Yes.
By knowing how to do that, I can then go communicate with them, and I could be realistic with the way I'm talking to them. If someone who knows nothing about editing goes to talk to an editor, they're going to give them assignments that are impossible. They're just they just don't make sense. They don't know what they're talking about. And people hate a boss like that.
Yeah.
And so, just being a good craftsman will make you a better boss as well, but it's not necessary. You can have the bigger vision, and then you can you can work with people that could take your vision and they know what to do with it, as long as you trust them.
Some of the best art directors I worked for had experience as illustrators. They knew what it was like. There were some very good art directors that had not had experience as illustrators. They were just good leaders. But there is that advantage to know the job of the people that you're working for.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. It's like the CEO of a software company who started out coding and knowing how software works, right?
Yeah, they just make better decisions and communicate better.
Okay, let's back up and figure out how this fits together.
I have something actually related to the failing fast.
Go ahead.
It's a really fun method, not fun, a very useful thing I came across actually last week. It's called the RRR method.
The RRR method?
RRR? Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about the RRR method.
It stands for the risk reduction rate.
Yeah, I'm worried.
You know about the confirmation bias?
Confirmation bias is that what you already believe is going to affect your perception.
Yes. Can we do a little experiment right now? And I just told you what I just told you what we're experimenting with, so I've pretty much ruined the experiment.
Yeah.
But let's just see anyway. Okay.
Let's give it a try.
I saw a video by Veritasium where he does this experiment. And he goes up to people on the street and he says, okay, I have a rule in my head that I'm thinking about related to numbers, a sequence of numbers. I'm going to tell you the sequence of numbers, and you got to figure out the rule. And the way you could figure it out is by telling me a different sequence of numbers that you think follows my rule, and I'll tell you if it does or doesn't. And you can just keep guessing what you think the rule is. Okay?
Okay.
A sequence of numbers that fits my rule is 1, 2, 4.
Okay.
Okay. So now you got to figure out what my rule is by giving me other sequences of numbers. And I'll tell you if those also fit my rule or not.
Okay. Well, I can think of two options.
Just keep shooting them at me.
Okay. The first one would be 4, 8, 16.
That does fit the rule, yes.
Okay. Another one would be 10, 11, 13.
Yes. That does fit the rule.
Yeah. Those are the only two I can think of, but I was never good at math.
You can attempt to define the rule at any point. And you, in order to get more clues as to what the rule is, you can keep giving me more sequences of numbers.
Oh, okay.
But it's a game. You just keep going until you figure out what that rule is.
5, 10, 20.
That does follow the rule.
Okay, then it's doubling the numbers.
No, that's not the rule. Keep throwing numbers at me.
But these numbers that I throw at you have to make sense. And I'm having a difficult time swimming around in numbers. This is why I could not pass the algebra class when I was in middle school.
This is not an algebra problem. You could throw whatever you want at me.
3, 5, 12.
Yes, that does follow my rule.
Is that right? How about this one? 21, 30, 150.
Yes, that follows my rule.
I figured out the rule. Yeah, I got it.
What's the rule?
It's that each number has to be bigger than the one previous.
Yes. You figured it out.
Oh.
Good job, Marshall.
Mrs. Wenzel, see, I turned out okay after all. Oh.
Yeah. So you actually did pretty good. Your trouble was actually figuring out that you could just throw numbers at me without being punished.
If I had said 21, 30, 18, it wouldn't have followed the rule, right?
I would have said, no, that does not follow the rule. And you would have known immediately.
Okay, then that verifies it.
Here's what happened in the video.
Tell me.
People would say like, okay, so he said 1, 2, 4. Okay, 3, 6, 12. And then he'd be like, yes. And then be like 10, 20, 40. And they'd be like, yes. And they'd be like, oh, it's doubling the numbers. And they'd be like, no. And they'd be like, what? 100, 200, 400. And then he'd be like, yes. And he'd be like, but what do you mean? And they'd keep confirming. They'd keep trying to confirm that they were correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? They didn't, their intuition wasn't to find out what was wrong, finding a failure. They keep trying to confirm their own belief of what the rule is. And then they were like surprisingly like, what are you talking about? And he's just like, listen, you could like tell me whatever you want. You just keep testing theories and figure out what's wrong so that then you can figure out what's right.
This makes so much sense now that you've explained it. And here's what was going on in my mind. It was exactly what this was meant to do. I had confirmation bias. My assumption was this is more challenging than it actually was. And the idea of the numbers just being big, I was seeing a pattern that I didn't even need to see. Yeah. And so I was trying to confirm that pattern. Okay, it makes total sense to me now. And it does demonstrate it very well.
Yeah. And your own belief about what you thought the problem was debilitating you in figuring out the actual problem, right?
Confirmation bias, yes.
So this same phenomenon, this thing that your brain just does, happens everywhere, okay? After I learned about this, I analyzed the way I started businesses before, okay? We're bringing it all back now, okay? And I think I mentioned this before, the first few businesses I started, I would get really excited about an idea, and then I'd be so passionate about it, I would just start focusing on all the exciting things. You know, I'd be like, oh man, I gotta design a logo. What's the name of my company gonna be? Oh, I gotta print some business cards. Let's make a website for it. Let's make a cool flash design, header on my website so that when people come on my website, they're all impressed. And it's like, well, how does your business work? Stop trying to confirm, figure out ways why you are right. Figure out what are the ways your business can fail. Focus on that stuff so that you can solve those problems first, prevent yourself from failing, and so you can see the solution faster.
Stan, I've got a picture of the sun up here. It's a graphic design that I like. And I can't help but just look up at this picture of the sun and feel like it all makes sense now.
Yeah. Our brain is an idiot.
Our brain seeks confirmation. Yeah, and it makes us an idiot.
It seeks pleasure.
Yeah, yeah.
Confirmation is pleasure. It makes us feel good about ourselves. And yeah, we want to confirm that we are right, and we want to keep going down that line. But yeah. Every problem, every project you begin, you need to begin it with the biggest risks first. That's what the RRR method is. It's the risk reduction ratio or whatever it is.
Okay, tell me.
You look ahead and you think, okay, what are all the things that could potentially make this project fail? And the project can be as big or as little as you want. Mm-hmm. You write them all down. You figure out a task that would reduce the risk Like, what can you do to reduce that risk? And then you give these, like, all these different ratings. You say, like, how long is this going to take? How much will it actually reduce the risk? You know, I could link to this article if people want to look at the details. But you give them these ratings, and it takes, you know, for a project like this, process will take, you know, 30 minutes or something. But it'll save you a lot of time going forward because now you know what to focus on. And so you give it all these ratings, and then you sort it in order. And now it shows you, okay, this is the task you need to focus on to reduce the risk of this project. You know, so you could apply this to an illustration. What's going to make this illustration fail? So,
for example, with your business, the logo and the website and all of those things should be after the fact. There's a potential for making money here.
Yeah. That's the big thing. And that's what I did with PROKO. It was the first time out of like the 5 or 6 companies that I started that I actually did it. I didn't know I was doing it. I was just so fed up at that point with all the stacks of business cards I had that I didn't give away to anybody. I was like, screw business cards. I still don't have a PROKO business card. I've never made PROKO business cards. And then my original PROKO logo for the first like 6 years was it was a font. I opened up Photoshop. I went through a list of fonts I had. I picked one that looks cool. I typed out PROKO, and that was my logo. Since then, you know, 6 years later, 7 years later, I actually hired a designer to do something. But yeah, I didn't care. I just launched my video. I focused on making the best quality video, trying to find an audience, and I did that, and it worked. I finally did it right at that point, and that's why it worked.
This reminds me of what a therapist mentioned about beginning a working relationship. I believe in listing your strengths. What do you bring to the team? And he said, don't forget also that it's important to list your weaknesses. And the reason being is that then you're aware of what the worst case scenario is and how to cover for it. And this is similar, right? That when we start out, what are the worst risks and how do we cover for them? And then that brings a sense of focusing on what's most important. That helps prioritize.
Yeah.
This was very good for me. This was clarifying. The confirmation bias is what makes us jump to the things we want to do that might not be the most practical things, which is great. It's part of what Neil Gaiman is talking about. Do what you want to do, make part of that, but also at some point flip into the black hat of those 6 thinking hats. Go from the yellow hat that says, oh, this is what I could do for a living, and then go to the black hat. How could it go wrong? And then between those two, you can balance what your love is and what the real world how the real world might respond.
I have another little tip I discovered recently that is almost like the opposite, but it's still very much related. It's instead of figuring out what are the biggest risks, it's figuring out what are the most important things that will lead to success.
Yeah.
And so you know about the 80-20 rule, right? I think at this point, everyone's heard of that, right? 80-20.
Let me see if I can sum up. The 80-20 rule is that 80% of your carpet will have 20% of the wear and tear, and 20% of your carpet will have 80%. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. So the general principle is, 20% of your efforts will produce 80% of the results.
Okay.
Right? So if you can identify what that 20% of the effort is that produces 80% of the results, you can focus on just that 20% of stuff and get 80% of the results from that.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a general principle. It's not always 80-20. Sometimes it's, 70-30, sometimes 90-10, whatever. You get the idea. It's not like everything is 1-to-1 as far as effort versus result. It's most things work very unbalanced in that way. There's some things you do that are extremely important. So you can take that 80-20 rule and apply it to itself 3 times, or as many times as you want.
Okay.
And compound it to figure out the 1% of effort that leads to 51% of the results. So it's not 20% of the stuff. Now you're going down to like that tiniest thing that'll give you half half of the results. Okay, if you compound it 3 times. Let me give you an example, because it just sounds like we're just doing math here.
Yeah, it confused me mathematically. I don't disbelieve it, but go ahead.
Here's an example of actually applying that without using math. So, and this is an example that I heard this from Eric Partaker from Pat Flynn's podcast. And I thought it was great. So about 20%, he asked, what 20% about a restaurant will lead to 80% of the reason why customers are happy? And he came up with good food. Mm-hmm. You focus on good food, that'll determine 80% of why customers are happy. Then you go deeper into that. Okay, with good food, what's the 20% of good food that will make people like it? Flavor.
Okay.
The flavor of the food. Okay. So what 20% of the ingredients contribute to 80% of the flavor?
Monosodium glutamate.
Yeah, sure. That leads to some successful businesses. No, but basically this led him to go to South America to source the best tasting chilies, because I think he was opening up a Mexican restaurant or something. Or I don't know, I don't know what type of restaurant he was, but chilies was the ingredient that would make his particular recipes taste really good. So he went there and he found the best possible chilies directly from the farmers. And so he focused on that 1%, that one little thing, and he got the best ones, and he added that to his recipe. So he thought the chilies were the key thing, that 1% that would lead to 50% of the results. So you can apply this to art. You can apply this to anything. So this is kind of like the opposite. Instead of looking for those biggest risks, you can use the 80-20 rule, compound it to look for that one big thing that you really need to focus on.
And he's also finding an ingredient that other people don't even know about, which makes the flavor in the food at that restaurant unique. You're not going to get it somewhere else.
Yeah, every restaurant doing this would kind of come up with a different solution as well, right? This is kind of an arbitrary thing. You're like, well, what do you think is that one ingredient that produces the most flavor, for your cuisine type?
So with artists and with entrepreneurs, this comes back to branding and finding out what it is that you offer that no other freelancer or no other company or no other employee is going to be able to give this company.
Yeah, exactly.
And standing strong with that.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, is figuring out what your value is. What are you offering that is you? Mm-hmm. It's not always about going out there and trying to figure out what problems there are, which is an important part of a successful business, is there needs to be demand for it as well. But you also need to figure out, is this the demand that these people have? Is this something that I'm actually the person to solve? Is this the value that I bring to the table? You really do need to kind of dig deep and figure out what your strengths are and what you're excited to do.
Digging down into it to find out what your strengths are. That's something we can take up in another podcast. Is this does not happen. And I watched the podcast. I listened to what they said about branding. I'm going to sit down. Boom, I wrote out what I have, my strength. There it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that way. It takes time and assessment.
Yeah, you're right. That would be a really good episode, wouldn't it? Just focusing in on that one thing and going deep into that. Okay, let's do that then. Let's make that an episode, and let's move on at this point from that and carry on with it later.
The topic is develop your art career. The big categories are to be an employee who has the least amount of freedom but the most supposed security, to be a freelancer who has a number of clients and you have more control over jobs because you can say no to them and you can do them if you meet the deadline on your own terms, in your own schedule and in your own way. And then the third one is the opposite of being an employee. It's to be an entrepreneur, where you take responsibility for everything, but you also have the opportunity to steer in whatever direction you discern to be the best direction, and you own it all.
You just said in a minute or 30 seconds what we were trying to say in the first 20.
Now, since we're paused on this, you're asking me if I have anything else to add to it.
If you don't, I have several other paths we can go down, but I don't want to take over.
Oh, keep going, Stan.
So another thing I wanted to bring up was good advice I heard from Ryan Holiday. He's the guy that wrote Ego's the Enemy and several other books. But I was listening to him on YouTube, and he's talking about 3 levels of priority of how you measure your own success. And this is related to artists because, so many of us now publish stuff online. Our artwork, we make videos, whatever your art is, we publish it online now a lot of the times, right? Mm-hmm. And we judge ourselves by 3 different things. And the way we judge ourselves drives our actions as well. It reinforces what we do. And so this is a really important thing. So the first level of priority of how you should judge yourself is how proud you are of this thing you made. Okay? And the reason is because you have full control of that. You decide if you're proud of it or not. You decide if this is important to you and if you did a good job doing it. You have full control. Nobody else can tell you to be proud or not to be proud.
Right.
The second level is measuring your success based on some kind of metric. Like how many likes you got on your painting that you posted. How many views you got on that YouTube video you posted. Right? And this you have partial control over, right? Like you might know your audience and you might know what they like, and so you tailor your work to that. You start kind of doing things in order to get more of that metric, right? So you have partial control, but still there's a little bit of randomness involved because it's other people giving you those likes and those views. Yeah. And sometimes the algorithm might just pick it up and you get 1 million views and you're like, what the heck happened there? So you have partial control, but not full control. The third level of priority is based on some award you got. Like with YouTube, it'd be like the Streamy Awards, right? Somebody decides that you got the best YouTube channel of the year. It's like someone just decided that you happen to be. And so that is like completely out of your control. It is based on this one person or this one little group of people's opinion. The problem is a lot of us judge our success in reverse. We want that award. We want to be recognized by some committee. We want to win that, actors, they want to win an Oscar, right? If we're artists, we want to win that painting competition that is known as the biggest one. It's in all the magazines or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's what we judge our success on. Like, I made it. So we have it in reverse, but really what's important is the other way around. And here's why. Ryan Holiday gave the perfect example, so I'm just going to use his.
Okay.
If you make a video, you post it online, and it's just, it gets 1 million views, but all it does is it gets a chuckle out of somebody, or out of all these millions of people. It's just like a little gag, like a little funny thing, a cat jumping and falling down or something. Cool. People laugh. It gets 5 million views. Mm-hmm. Didn't really make a big impact on anybody that watched it. Mm-hmm. Or the complete opposite. You post a video that only gets 5,000 views or 500 views, whatever, much less than the other one, but it makes a really deep impact on those people that watched it. It can change some lives. It inspires them to do something meaningful, to change their life, whatever. You get it, right? It doesn't just make them chuckle. It teaches them something. It inspires them to change their life around, whatever. But it only got watched by 500 people. What's more valuable? Which video is more valuable? Yeah. And what should you focus your time on? Getting that one cat video that gets chuckle out of 5 million people? Or making that video that changes the 5,000 lives?
That makes, I
mean, so it's like, what are you proud of?
Yeah.
It's like you decide. You're definitely going to be more proud of But I mean, obviously, pride is also a personal thing. It's like you might be more proud of 5 million views.
But still, there's a time where you feel like this is the best I could do, and I did it.
Yeah.
And it's a good feeling.
Yeah, so that's an example of how metrics are not always valuable.
I've noticed how often authors and filmmakers will say that I feel like that's the best work that I did, but it wasn't the most popular. And often enough, when you go to the best work that author claims, it really is. There's a reason why they feel so good about it. It just didn't strike a nerve with everyone. What do you feel about that you're most proud of that may not have measured up?
That it may not have measured up by metrics?
Yeah, that you're more proud of it than the metrics.
I have a great example, and this is something I talked about before, and this explains it perfectly. So you know how I was talking about the anatomy course, how I spent 6 years doing it. Anatomy is very specialized. It doesn't get as many views as if like I just focused on figure drawing or portrait drawing, some simple stuff. That stuff gets way more views. I could focus on just entertaining people and focus on the views. But I focused on anatomy because I was more proud of making these specialized videos that I knew were helping students a lot.
Yeah.
It was hurting my channel because anatomy videos always get less views. I mean, I care. It's always like, God, why? Why again? I'm so happy with this video, but why is it less views? So I care, of course, but I always remind myself that like, I know this is important. I'm going to keep going anyway, and I'm going to keep doing this for 6 years and keep hurting my channel a little bit. So that's a scenario where I didn't care about the metrics as much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What about you? Do you have any examples? Turn it around.
Yeah, I've got a number of examples, but one of the ones that I've mentioned over and over on this podcast, and that is relevant to this topic, is that lecture I did in 2014, that $4 lecture on design your career with a whiteboard. It is an unpolished production, and it was in front of a group at the community college with a number of students who are now professionals, and it has not sold that well. And I think it's only $4. How valuable could it be? But the reason I feel so good about it is because the content in there was as good as I could offer for if you've got 1 hour to be thinking about how you're going to use a whiteboard to make your career happen. Here's what I can offer you: a list of metaphors to how to look at the whiteboard, and also an awareness that it's not a magic instrument, but it's a really useful tool. Yeah, if there was any one thing that I had to say, that's what I've done so far, that is certainly no impressive production. It feels like such a valuable thing that when people have told me how it did, their life was pivotal, their career was pivotal, just on what they got out of that 1 hour, that does make me feel good. It's not going to make me rich.
Yeah.
But, it's hardly bought, it hasn't even bought groceries, but I do feel good about it.
Yeah. The reason I really brought this up though is because this applies to a lot of different things that you do, pretty much anything you create. And so I want to make sure people understand that like, you shouldn't keep fighting for the metric. Don't keep trying to get the most likes possible. Stick to what you want to do, what you believe in, because that's a much better long-term goal, right? You can keep climbing with more views and tailoring everything to what you know is going to be viral and stuff. But that you're going to burn out probably because you're not going to enjoy. You're going to end up doing things that keep taking you further and further away from what you want to do. And then you'll realize like, oh, this is not why I started this. And then you're either going to quit, start over, or you're going to burn out and just I don't know what can happen from there. But stick to, long term, going a little bit slower, but making meaningful, valuable stuff, long term will big up a much more stable structure for your business or for your art, for your career. And people will respect you a lot more in the end. And you'll be happier.
So this is finding a balance between the money and the love.
Yeah.
The likes and what you deem to be the quality of your work.
And not to say that you can't make some little things to please your audience every once in a while that are going to go viral. Yeah, have fun too, But understand, that the core of what you do should be things you believe are valuable.
Yeah. I'm teaching a cartooning class right now at the community college, which, because I love cartoons, that's the reason I'm teaching it. This is an excuse to spend a semester again in cartoons and cartoonists. And the first assignment is to read Gary Larson's The Prehistory of the Far Side, because he talks about how he became a cartoonist. And it wasn't that he set out to be a cartoonist from the time he was young. He liked cartoons. He was influenced by them. But the main thing was that he hated his job. And he took, I think, 3 weeks off from his job, and during that time put together cartoons that are things he wanted to do. And I think he sold them for something like $15 a piece. And there may have been a point in there where he was selling some of these for $3 a piece, but it meant that he's getting paid to do his cartoons. And then within a matter of a year or 3, he is becoming immeasurably wealthy because everybody thinks these cartoons are as funny as he thought they were when he thought them up. And they were not original. There were artists before him, Gahan Wilson, Klebon, Sergio Aragones, a couple of which were not household names because they did stuff for Playboy, and so their stuff was more offensive to mainstream sensibilities. But Gary Larson sort of cleaned it up, made it more mainstream, and he did it out of hatred for his current job and out of deciding I would like to do this if I was going to do anything, getting a little money for it, doing it so well that when it took big. You know, it might, 10 or 20 years earlier, it might not have taken. But there's an example of someone who was not going at this to become rich. He was going at it because he thought these cartoons were funny.
Yeah.
And it was someone who, he never studied cartooning in school. So there's
really?
There's the first lesson in my cartooning class is quit this class as soon as you're on a roll with your cartoon ideas, and they're coming out of you one after another, and you can get a market for them.
That's funny.
I have one more thing, but I'll end on it. What do you have more to say?
I think maybe some people coming into this episode that maybe have not heard all our other episodes might have been hoping for like some advice on growing your social media following or something like that, right? Like that seems to be the obvious advice for an episode like this. But the reason we didn't really go into it is because we kind of did one like at the very end of the last season. And so if you're looking for social media advice, season 2 episode almost the last.
I liked that episode. I felt like there was some really valuable stuff in there for exactly that.
No, I'm happy with it. Yeah. Oh, it's called The Do's and Don'ts of Social Media for Artists. So if you guys are interested, go look that up. Go ahead. What did you want to end on?
I want to end on a documentary called The Wrecking Crew. It's about musicians, freelance musicians in the 1960s. They were a group somewhere between a dozen or 2 dozen. And if you don't care for 1960s pop music, you probably won't like this documentary. But I'm not recommending it for the music, even though the music means a lot to me, because this was when I was a kid and I remember every single one of these songs. They did the music for popular songs of the time, and I mean everybody. They had nothing to do with the Beatles because they were in Los Angeles. But they had everything to do with the Beach Boys. In fact, the Beach Boys' best songs were the ones that they were doing the playing on. And they also were the musicians for Sonny and Cher and Simon and Garfunkel and the Association and Elvis and Frank Sinatra and Nancy Sinatra, and also TV show theme songs, the Bonanza theme, the Green Acres theme, and also commercial jingles. So their music dominated the 1960s, and nobody knew them by name. They only knew the front people that they were accompanying.
Yeah.
The reason I'm recommending it is this is a portrait of freelancers in the 1960s who were willing to get into studios and do whatever needed to be done for that project. And they were not famous in the public, but they were famous in the industry, and they made great money. And this is a portrait of their careers. And it's a long arc of their careers. And even though we're talking about the better part of 60 years ago, the lessons in there for freelancers today hold still. They're just as relevant now. About your reputation in the industry, about camaraderie, about having great skill to where they didn't even practice their instruments because they didn't need to, because every time they went into a session, it was so demanding to play that music that these people were at the top of their game, about how rich they got, about how the industry changed rapidly and radically, and how they were at the top, but they also lost those sources of income, about the tension between the profession and their families. It's just rich with content for anyone setting out to be a freelancer in the arts to get a dose of what happened in their careers. It won't be your favorite documentary, but I do think that it would be worth your time if you want a portrait of professional freelancers in the arts that's relevant for you even now. The Wrecking Crew.
It's a wild ride.
Good doing the podcast with you again.
Yeah, Marshall, thank you so much. It's great to hear from you. Hey, great to see your lovely face and your beard.
Thank you.
What are we going to talk about next week?
This business of branding yourself and getting your career going, the assumption that it can happen instantly. Oh, I listen to the podcast, now I know which direction I'm going. It won't happen instantly, typically. And so embracing a process of scribbling to discover, of doing it wrong quickly, doing it wrong several times and readjusting. I think that we might be able to make an analogy between a process of drawing that has served some artists very well and a process of designing a career. How's that sound?
An episode on scribbling.
Yeah.
Scribbling in many different ways.
Yeah. See you next week.
Bye, guys. Thanks for listening and watching.
It's saying it's an invalid meeting. Not a valid meeting, not a valid meeting, unable to join this meeting.